Hey there, this is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. And in this video, I'm going to share some music production tips while recreating the beat in 21 Pilots' Chlorine. So let's go ahead and listen to the finished product. So it might sound pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of nuances that go into the sound design to craft it and match the mood and the texture that we hear on the reference. So I'm going to start by focusing in on the drums. So our first track here is a drum rack in Ableton Live loaded with some sounds. Now all these sounds derived from a breakbeat that was automatically sliced and assigned to each of these pads. So let me walk you through that. So I'm going to go to the original source, clicking the hot swap here, and here we have the actual drum break. So I can drag and drop that into our project, and now we can have access to the actual breakbeat. But what I want to do is create my own rhythm, but using the same sounds that we hear in this drum loop. So I'm just going to right click, choose slice to new MIDI track. And you can determine how the slices are going to be crafted. So every eighth note, that means I want you to automatically at every eighth note subdivision, create a slice, or every quarter note, or every 30 seconds note. So I'm going to leave it at every eighth note here and then hit OK. And that's going to create a brand new MIDI track with the drum rack loaded on there that gives me the ability to now trigger those individual slices. So that's what we've done here. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those two tracks. And we've got this track here with all those slices in there. All right, let's focus in on the actual drum pattern now. So here we're going to start off with just our kick and snare. Now let's go ahead and incorporate our hi-hat pattern. So I'm going to use our pencil tool to draw in. Let's find our hi-hat slice. We have one right here, and simply draw that in. Next, we can go ahead and incorporate almost another nuanced, like a pickup kick drum before the snare happens over here on beat 2. So that slice right here has the hi-hat and then a kick drum. So what I'm going to do is just place this down right here and see what that does. So it's got that nice little pickup kick in there. So let me highlight that sample. That's slice 4, and we could see it right here, the hi-hat playing and then the beginning of this kick hit. So let me go ahead and incorporate that as well right here to the next spot. So I'm just going to highlight these this bar here and hit Command D to duplicate that, and we'll keep doing that all the way across. Now what I've done is I've taken the slice, one of the same slices here, and I've gone to the slice itself and just hit reverse sample. And then that's going to give me the sample reverse. So I'll just play it. This is a sample normally. So it's just a kick drum. I'm going to zoom in here and then just right click and reverse that sample so that we can go ahead and create this nice little reversal feel that we hear in the pattern. And I'm going to put that right above this drum hit as well. So I'll click the speaker here just to hear this clip from this section. So that might be a little too fast. So what we'll do is just move that over. There you go. And now that is our drum beat. So a little bit of processing that we're going to do here. Let's EQ this a little bit. So I've got this EQ boosting some low end and scooping out some of the low mids and giving a little bit boost at the high end. And then adding a glue compressor here from Ableton Live to give a little more punchiness from the dynamics. And that's really just to help the initial kick and snare pop a little bit more. So I've got the attack here on the glue compressor at 10 and the release here at 2 with 4:1 ratio. Then I'm adding a saturator on top of that. I'm going to just give a crunch of about 8 dB of drive, and then I'll scale it back here a little bit with the output. You could really hear it on that first initial kick drum with that saturator. And then another EQ, just to take off just this resonance here I was hearing. That's it. So, but what I want to do is now do a little bit of parallel processing in the sense where I'm going to take this drum break here, and then I'm going to go ahead and recreate the same rhythm using an acoustic drum kit, a virtual acoustic drum kit, and then kind of layer them together to capture this whole feel. Because a lot of times you'll get that kind of feel on the 21 Pilots record, being that one of the artists is a fantastic drummer and incorporates a lot of that into the productions as well. So let's go ahead and do that now. So for that, I'm going to use the Addictive Drums 2, and I'm browsing through the drum patches here, and I've landed on Fairfax Volume 2. It's a pretty great sounding drum kit. It matches pretty much the texture and the overall vibe that I hear on this reference. So we're going to do some processing. So first, let's go ahead, drag and drop the same drum pattern that we have in our sample beat here. So I'm going to click Option and drag that down below. But since we were triggering samples with this one here, we need to make sure that we move and allocate these notes to the right sounds. So instead of a ride, we have to go ahead and move this up to find a hi-hat. So there you go. And bring the velocity up a little bit. And then that's that secondary kick drum. So it doesn't need to be a snare. So I'll move that down. And should be right about here for that pickup. Thing is, we can also change the tone by lowering the velocity of that second kick drum. And with these live drums, velocity plays a huge role in shaping the overall sound. So now that we've got that in there, I'm going to go ahead and gate this sound, and I'm going to use the actual sample drum, or the sliced drum kit, to trigger this the live acoustic drum kits. And the reason behind doing that is so that it really just captures, I kind of want them to be completely in sync, right? So in the sense of sound-wise, I don't want a lot of bleed coming in from the acoustic drums. So I'm going to use a gate to control that. And I'm going to have the drum sample here, track 12, which is the slice drum kit, go ahead and do that. So it's nice and short. And then we're going to add some overdrive to this. And this really adds so much life to acoustic drums. So without it. And then we're going to go ahead and add a lot of compression to this, because it's almost, I'm treating this live drum kit as a parallel signal. I'm really just going to be layering this with the initial first sliced up drum beat, so that we get more of that room, that acoustic drum room feel than the sample. So we've got the attack here on this glue compressor at 10 and the release at 2 here. Really slow attack and somewhat of a short release, and 4:1. Where we're going drastic here on the threshold. And then to actually downsample this, to actually make this live acoustic drum kit feel like an actual sample, we're going to use the digital distortion. Here in Ableton Live, it's called Redux. So I'm going to click, enable this on, and just give a little pinch of that. Just without it. And then EQ this a little bit, so we get a little nice boost here on the bottom end, and then warm up the sound by taking some of the high end off. Let's see what it sounds like with both drums. So what I'm after is I want the first initial drum kit to be the punch, and And then I want the live acoustic drums to be the ambience. Makes a big difference. And then let's go ahead and send the sample drums over to send B, which has a reverb on there. And a couple of things are happening here. So I'm EQing the signal before the reverb. So I make sure there's no low end and no high end going in. And then what we're doing is just putting a nice decay time on there, big size, big stereo width on the reverb. But I'm tweaking around with the diffuse and this diffusion network. Basically saying that diffuse now, think of it as loading a room filled with, like you've got an empty room. But then the more diffusion you add in there, well, for instance, let's say you're in this empty room. When you clap, you can hear the reverb. You can hear your voice reverberating around the walls. But then you start to fill it up with furniture, your neighbor's couch, your auntie's farm animals, whatever happens, you got them all crammed in there, and those items start to diffuse the actual signal bouncing from the walls. So when you turn this knob to the left, you're diffusing negative 4.8 dB from the reverb. That's why when I crank it to the right, it sounds like there's more decay being emitted. So just tweaking this out, and I'm just going to lower the diffuse. And I'm going to lessen the send. And send a little bit of that. And we're just trying to create that ambience. So then after the reverb, we're also taking away some of the high end and low end as well. So some EQ before, some EQ after, and then just making sure that the diffusion network is really just focusing in on the highs of the reverb. All right, now to focus in on the bass line, let's go ahead and use Ableton Live's wavetable. Click and drag and drop that to a MIDI track. Now, when listening to the song, the bass in the chorus and in certain parts throughout the song, it isn't really necessarily just subby, where it's just a sub bass. There is some presence to it. And it almost has, and we're going to talk about it, we'll layer it with something else, but it's got a different tone than just a sine wave bass line. So I'm going to experiment by starting off with venturing over to a square wave. And that's got that nice buzz that can really cut through. And let's set our synthesizer from polyphonic to mono. So search on your synthesizer in your DAW where you can switch it from polyphonic to monophonic. That way the notes won't overlap when we play them. So let's listen in to the bass line. So let's go ahead and shape the tone of that. So we'll start by filtering out some of that buzz at that high frequency, but then resonating, getting a nice, the peak going on at that point of the frequency. So let's go ahead and maybe, let's see, bring it about here and maybe moving this around 300. Let's see what that sounds like. And then layering that square wave with another oscillator here and setting this one to a sawtooth. And detuning the second oscillator. Just slightly, maybe about 10 cents. And then let's go ahead and give some filter drive. So I'm using the OSR and cranking this to get some nice crunch to it. And I'm going to turn on the second filter on here. And if you don't have an additional filter on your synthesizer, you can just use another EQ to just carve out a little bit of that low end. Just around here. And then just move the tail a little bit. So the release, we'll extend the release a little bit so that the note continues to play once the note is done playing here. So once we let our finger off the note can kind of linger a little bit. All right, and then let's set a little bit of unison. So I'll set this over here to classic and then leave it at 3 voices and bring it down just a little bit. And that's going to help create some nice stereo depth and width there. Now let's go ahead and use an EQ. And the reason for me using this EQ is just to maybe take any other. And once I have that there, I'm going to go ahead and use a compressor to sidechain. So I would like the kick drum of the sliced drum kit that we did to trigger this bass line. This is going to create a nice little pulse and movement with the bass line as well. So where are we getting the audio from? Well, I'm going to get it from track 12 there. I should really just rename this. I'll just rename this to sample drums. There you go. And then I'll go back in here. I'm getting the audio from sample drums, and then what slice, that first initial slice, and then bring the ratio up. We want it to be pretty dramatic, and bring the threshold down. That sounds cool. Now let's see what that sounds like with the drums. Let's head over to the instruments and let's layer this bass with a cello, almost like a cello sound. So I just type in the word cello, go over here to instrument rack, and yeah, solo cello will be fine. Click and drag that here. And then let's just literally copy the bass line over to the cello. Now, it might be an octave too low. So I'm gonna Command A and just hit Shift and up, and that's gonna shift the whole performance up an octave. That's cool. Now let's make it a little bit more atmospheric and dreamy and not so dry and in your face. And we could do that by just inserting a reverb directly on there. So drag and drop the reverb, and now we've got I'm using the input processing to really just carve out the low end. And I'm gonna balance this out with the bass and the drums. I'm gonna EQ the strings a little bit too. I wanna dull them out. Cool. Now for the piano riff that we hear in the chorus, let's go ahead and head back to our instrument rack in Ableton Live and look for a piano. I'll actually just go over here in the search field and type in piano and narrow that down here. So piano and keys, and we'll use a basic grand piano. So just drag and drop that in there, and let's just take a listen to the actual riff. So just messing around with some of the parameters that are offered here. The hardness is going to actually end up adjusting some of the velocity changes. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm also going to use a velocity plugin here. I'm going to my MIDI effects folder and then using velocity. And I'm going to go ahead and enable that. And that's going to go before the MIDI because it affects the MIDI information that's being sent to the instrument. And instead of at 127, I want to basically unify the velocity of all the notes that the max that they'll actually reach is about 62. That's going to have a nice, delicate, soft performance. So let's do a little bit of tweaking. Let's extend the release of these notes so it's not so stiff and they kind of linger from one note to the next. And raise the attack up a little bit as well, and some brightness. And I'm going to give some reverb here and increase some of the glue compression. See what the tone sounds like. That sounds nice. Now let's use an EQ to just do some additional carving out here. And then I'm going to also do another compressor. As a matter of fact, let's go to that bass line that we had here. I'm going to hold the Option key, click, and drag that over to the piano. I'm taking the same side chain of the kick drum to the piano as well. And then to really get that cool sampled vintage type of piano sound, you could use a chorus at the very end. Not too much, because then it sounds a bit honky-tonky, but a little chorus does go a long way. See what that sounds like with everything else. So now let's send some of that to the same reverb that we were sending the drums to. And then I also have a echo plugin here, which is a simple delay, not to be confused with the old simple delay. But anyways, I digress. Just that eighth note delay here. And let's send a little bit of the piano to that. Here's a cool elements that you can use as ear candy to actually fill up some more of the atmosphere. So first we have this initial little impact hit at the very beginning of the chorus or the phrase. And that's really cool to just create some nice tension release when we arrive at the chorus. Then we have a couple little these vocal echo things happening. So I just sampled or just recorded myself making this noise. Well, that's not actually me. Well, it is me, but pitched up. So here it is. Oh. That's just me saying, oh, right? Then I just pitched it up about 13 semitones there. And we're going to delay that with a quarter note delay. And then inserting a reverb right after that delay. And that's really just the default reverb. And then the trick is just filtering that out. So we're just going to use an auto filter, or you can use an EQ. Just take away all that high end there. And I'm using the utility plugin just to give a little bit more stereo width. I'm increasing a little bit of the side information there. So you have the mid-side balance. I'm just going to increase the side a little bit more. Let's see what that sounds like with everybody else. Well, I hope this video has been helpful for you and inspiring you to use some of these techniques that I've shared with you in your projects today. And to help you do that, I want to share with you the sounds from this session, as well as a construction kit filled with loops, transition effects, one-hits, and a bunch of sounds that you can use absolutely yours, royalty-free, just by clicking the link below in the description box. And even if you're not using Ableton Live, both the construction kits and the sounds that I'm using in this session can be accessed. Just simply download the link. Once you click the link below in the description box, give me your email. I'll send it directly to your inbox. Make sure it doesn't get landed in spam. And once you've done that, download the zip file and unzip it. And you can go ahead and access that by looking where it says samples. And you can check imported samples, processed, recorded, all the samples, even myself recording the little audio thing can be located there. And just simply import that into your DAW and you're ready to go. If you're using Ableton Live, just simply open up the session and it's right there ready for you to experiment with. So once again, thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date. I also do random live Q&A, so you want to be up to date with when that happens. So click the like button and subscribe so the algorithm from YouTube can let you know when the next video is up and coming. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.